So we had the Oleksandr Usyk Dereck Chisora launch press conference today. The fight is scheduled to take place on May the 23rd. Now, most people are picking Oleksandr Usyk to win this fight, and I'm in that camp as well. Because if you look at Dereck Chisora's record, yes, he's lost 9 times, but even in some of the fights he hasn't lost, he has struggled with movers. So, of course, we know that he lost twice to Tyson Fury, who moved a lot in both fights. He also lost to Ajit Kabayel, who moved a lot, lost that on an MD, lost to Kubrat Pulev, even had issues with Marcelo Nascimento, who moved a lot. That went to points over 10. And most recently, he couldn't pin down Senad Gashi, who boxed a lot of that fight southpaw, if not most of it. Gashi, a similar size to Usyk, maybe a bit smaller actually in terms of height and reach. And as I say, Dereck Chisora struggled to land a clean shot on Gashi all night. He won the fight, no problem, because Gashi really didn't have any offense of his own. But it just goes to show that if you employ some movement and you've got decent foot speed, Dereck Chisora is going to struggle to keep up with you. So with that being said, Oleksandr Usyk, one of the best movers in the whole game. He can move for 12 rounds, absolutely no problem at all. And unlike Senad Gashi, he's got elite level offense that he can add to that movement. One of the most impressive performances of Usyk's career, for me at least, was when he beat Krzysztof Glowacki for the WBO Cruiserweight World title. He put on an absolute clinic. I mean, he boxed circles around that guy. Kept moving all night, popping a jab. Just fantastic boxing. Dereck Chisora is going to need to obviously be consistent and persistent, but he's also going to need a lot of luck to be able to win this fight, in my view. Now, that luck might come in the form of an injury to Oleksandr Usyk, because they have delayed the announcement of this fight. And Eddie Hearn was pretty frank in saying that, yeah, Usyk has had this niggle with his elbow. But that niggle with his elbow has been going on for how long now? At least a year? We've been hearing about this elbow issue for Oleksandr Usyk. One of the things which was surprising to me is when Usyk said that he was very nervous for his fight against Chaz Witherspoon. Why on earth would a guy who was an Olympic gold medalist, who did fantastically well in the World Series of Boxing, who was undisputed cruiserweight champion and fought lots of men in elite level fights in their backyards and won those fights, why would a guy like that be very nervous fighting Chaz Witherspoon? I mean, in that fight, you could see him crossing himself, making the sign of the crucifix, I think before several of the rounds. That might just be something he regularly does in fights, perhaps. But again, he admitted that he was very nervous for that fight. I just find it strange. The only way I can, in my head, explain why he might be very nervous is because he wasn't 100%. And he was worried about, what if my injury plays up, or what if this happens or that happens? So, does Oleksandr Usyk's elbow injury, or maybe some other injury, take confidence away from him and also ability away from him? And if so, how much? Does it take enough away from him for Dereck Chisora to actually have a decent chance of winning this fight? These are the questions. If Oleksandr Usyk is firing on all cylinders and he's at 100%, I would be surprised if Dereck Chisora beats him. I'm not going to say I'll be amazed, because at the end of the day, Usyk hasn't fought anybody as big and strong and bullish as Chisora with that type of style. He easily outboxed Gassiev, but Gassiev isn't as developed as a front foot pressure fighter as Dereck Chisora is. Dereck Chisora bobs and weaves. He's obviously much bigger than Gassiev. He's a very physically strong man who's used to being in there against huge heavyweights. So against Usyk, Dereck Chisora is probably going to look very, very strong indeed. So I know that it's uncharted territory for Usyk, But I still feel as though when I look at many of Dereck Chisora's previous fights, surely Usyk is going to be able to replicate and go some better than other fighters who have faced Chisora that moved a lot and outboxed him. You know, the Ajit Kabayel fight wasn't a million years ago. The Senad Gashi fight was relatively recent. And yes, again, he won the fight, but go back and watch it. See how many times Dereck Chisora is able to land anything clean on that guy. He hardly could at all. And that's Senad Gashi. Yeah? So I'm expecting an Oleksandr Usyk points victory here. If he's firing on all cylinders. If there is an upset and Dereck Chisora does get him, I'll be surprised. I can't say it will be a massive shock. Again, because of the weight jump and the potential injuries there for Usyk. It won't be a massive shock, but it definitely will be a surprise because I think Usyk is just too talented and too good a mover for Dereck Chisora. Some people are talking about whether this fight should be pay-per-view. I mean, on paper, can it be justified as a pay-per-view? Well, obviously they made Vasyl Lomachenko versus Luke Campbell a pay-per-view, but that was a world title fight for one. And also, I think Vasyl Lomachenko, at least this is my perception, is a more popular fighter globally than Oleksandr Usyk is. Even though Usyk has been fantastically successful himself, and unlike Lomachenko, he hasn't taken a loss, the impression I get is that Lomachenko is a bigger name. Maybe because he's fought, more high-profile fights in the United States, whereas Usyk has been kind of on the road everywhere. He hasn't really settled down to build a buzz around him in one particular spot. I don't know. In fact, give me your thoughts on that. Why do you think that Lomachenko is a bigger name than Usyk, if he is at all? Maybe my perception is off on that. But yeah, I think that Oleksandr Usyk should be winning this fight. Is it a pay-per-view? I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to whether you as an individual think it represents value. I'll be interested to see who they put on the undercard. If they can bolster it up with a real strong undercard, then maybe, maybe. And who knows, if Dereck Chisora manages to pull off the upset, let's say he knocks Usyk out, very few people will be asking for their money back. I've heard Eddie Hearn say this at times, wait till after the event before you start slating me about a pay-per-view. And to be fair, I was proved wrong by one of Eddie Hearn's cards, and that was the AJ Ruiz card, because I said before that fight that the undercard was weak, that the AJ Ruiz top of the bill was decent, but the undercard, nah. I turned out to be completely wrong, because that undercard actually produced some really, really good fights. So, it has to be said, probably best to wait till after. Now, certain pay-per-views, of course, you're more likely to be able to predict whether it's going to be worth it or not. But some of them, when there's a measure of uncertainty, like this one here, you never know. It's like with the David Haye, Tony Bellew pay-per-views. The first one in particular. David Haye was a big favorite, but there was all these rumors about him being injured and all this kind of stuff behind the scenes, and he'd fought very weak opposition in his comeback. So there was still kind of questions about David Haye. And we found answers to those questions in that fight. And although people were complaining before Haye Bellew won, nobody was complaining afterwards. They got their money's worth. So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about Oleksandr Usyk versus Dereck Chisora. Scheduled to take place on May the 23rd. Usyk's second fight in the heavyweight division. And this, I believe, might be a WBO final eliminator, because Oleksandr Usyk is already the mandatory for the WBO. But if a mandatory takes a fight prior to his title shot, they often make that basically a defense of his mandatory status. So if Dereck Chisora was to beat Usyk, then he becomes the mandatory and he gets a shot at whoever's the WBO champion after AJ versus Pulev. So yeah, anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's Hatman, I'm out. Hatman merch is now available. We got t-shirts, vests, hoodies, and more. Just click the link below. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.